point at you when we're live.
Okay. Hi, and welcome back to Terri Reid's Attic. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm really looking forward to these Tuesday afternoon chats that we have. I hope all of you who are moms had a great Mother's Day. It's beautiful weather here. We've had some frost advisories, and so we've had to go out and put plastic all over our squash plants. I planted them too early. It was warm outside. So I thought, heck, I can plant these. And so I went out and I'm trying to think of how many we planted.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot. It was, we have 10 rows and I spaced them. So we've got like 50 feet of garden. I spaced the rows like 5 feet apart. And then the rows are about 30 feet long. And we planted pumpkins and winter squash and melons and watermelons and like acorn squash. I mean, all of them. So, and then of course it says, oh, it's going to freeze. So Andrew and I had to go outside and put plastic. And of course it's a windy day. It was a great experience. It was a great bonding experience. It was a really great bonding experience.
Yeah.
Andrew agrees. Andrew is saying to me that I should, the reason I'm just chatting and not reading stories is that it's usually the 5-minute mark when most people come in. And so I'm just kind of saying that for 5 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, we can do that too on this side of it too. How's your weather? How was your Mother's Day? How are things going? Any of those chatty things.
So some people have commented already. Terry Bowles saying, hi, Terry. I'm so glad to be able to join you guys this time.
Nice to have you. Yay. Andrew has a computer screen. So I just sit here and he tells me what's going on. So yeah, if he's doing something tricky, I mention it on this thing. So
Linda Wooten says hi. Terry Snyder says
hi, Terry.
It's good. Hello, it's good to see you. And weather stinks. Mother's Day was good.
I'm sorry your weather stinks. And you have scary Oklahoma weather. So it really does stink. But I'm glad your Mother's Day was good. Am I thinking? Yeah, it's Terry.
Yeah, Terry Snyder.
Terry Snyder. No, Terry Snyder might be
Virginia.
Yeah, no, Terry Snyder's in you're in Kentucky, right? Who am I thinking about? See, I have to look at it. I'm a very visual person. Who am I? What is Terry saying? That where does she live?
Well, she hasn't responded yet. Linda Wooten said, "I've been." You're right, Mom. Terry Snyder is in Oklahoma. Linda Wooten says, "I've been working on making face masks to donate. I've made over 700 so far."
You are awesome. That is so great. Everywhere I go now, and I don't go out very often, except like in my backyard, but everywhere I go, everyone's wearing face masks. And so you need to start doing those like a steampunk face mask and open up your own designer shop. We talked about that last week. Yeah. Call it Masquerade. I think we talked about that last week too. So yeah, good for you. Good for you for doing that.
Let's see. Shelia says hello from Wigan, UK.
Hello. I should try to do that with an English accent, but it would really fail badly. So I'm not going to try. Thank you for, well, what is it about? Is it 8 o'clock? 9 o'clock at night in the UK. So 9 o'clock is just about the time I'm thinking I could go to bed early. So thank you for staying up.
Terry, I think it's Bowles or Bowles. I'm just trying to differentiate the different Terrys.
Okay.
She said that I'm trapped in a quilt.
Is that a good thing? So like a warm, comfortable quilt, or are you quilting and you're trapped?
Yeah, and then Terry Snyder says, I haven't been out since March 16th.
Sometimes it's just nice to get in the car and drive. If you saw my post today on Facebook with the sandhill cranes, so Andrew and I were taking a walk on the Jane Addams Trail, which is about a couple miles away from here. It runs along an old railroad track that is now this hike trail. And we saw we heard first these sandhill cranes, and we stopped and took pictures. But it was so nice to get outside, and not just be confined. But again, I'm really spoiled because we have 5 acres. So I go out and Brody and I take a walk and check all the vegetables and things like that every day. Brody's job is to scare all of the robins out of the yard. He's not very good at that job, but everyone has to have a job to do. So that's his job.
Brody is about as intimidating as a dandelion.
He tries hard.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he's done. Have you guys seen pictures of Brody? Maybe if Brody can make it up the attic steps, we'll let Brody come in to the next group. Speaking of the next group, I'm in about 5 minutes.
Yep, you are.
Yay. Speaking of the next group. So, and the other reason we wanted to wait is we wanted to get as many of you as possible. So next Tuesday, how would you feel about doing the writers kind of, I guess it's a lesson, a discussion, talking about being an indie author, giving points on writing, doing that kind of thing in lieu of ghost stories? Or do you still want ghost stories and maybe we do the writer's thing afterwards? So that is our poll question, but we can't do a poll because we're on YouTube. So if you guys would comment, and basically we could gear it to adults or teenagers or whatever, but just talk about the whole idea of being an independent author, writing in general, those, where do you get your ideas? I mean, those kinds of things. And then it could be, I could present some information, but then it could be a question and answer. So respond to Andrew about what you think about that. If you still want the ghost stories, because that's kind of what you tune in for, we can still do that, instead. But yeah, just let me know what you think. And I guess I can start.
Yeah, people are already commenting. Terry Bowles says that would be great. Terry Snyder says both, please. Terry Bowles again said Terry and I talked about doing a writer's workshop in Louisville.
That's okay. So that Terry is in Louisville, Kentucky. See? Yeah. Okay. And that's Terry Purvis. It's right, Terry. What is okay? Yeah, I'll look.
And then Sheila says, "Ghost stories, please, Terry. I'm interested in indie writing."
Okay, so maybe what we do is we do a long one next week. Can we do that? Can you fit that?
Or just instead of a normal question and answer, it's a question and answer about writing stories.
So we do like 30 minutes of ghost stories, and then we move into and if it goes long, we can go long. We can go long.
And Terry says Terry Purvis Bullis.
That's okay. That's yes.
I think I'm pronouncing Bullis right. If not, it's Bowles.
Oh, I think it is Boyle.
Bowles.
Bowles. I would think.
Okay. Bowles. Anyway.
I've just read it though. Okay. They say that you should never make fun of somebody for saying a word wrong because it means that they found the word because they were reading. And we always want to encourage reading. So we won't pick on you for saying words wrong. Because we're nice people here.
Like a bowl of fruit.
That's
Bowls.
right. Bowls. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, is that what she said?
Yeah, like a bowl of fruit.
Okay.
Okay.
She makes gelato, homemade. I know, right? Andrew's making a face. Okay, so I'm going to read stories now. Oh, finally, right? So last week when we were here, Timothy had just been warned by a ghost down in the records area. Remember, the file opened and the ghost said, "Get out of there." And he got out of there. Okay, so that's kind of where we ended. And so now we're going to start with art. Well, okay, here we are. Speaking of the right time, art inserted. How long is the statute of limitations on not telling your parents the truth? Just as an aside, I've noticed I've asked that question a lot through these books. Because my kids ask that same question too when we get together for family get together. So, sorry. Back to the story. Margaret glanced over at him and shook her head. There is no statute of limitations on that. Then she smiled. But if we're going to get a good ghost story from it, we'll grant you clemency. Well, I hope it's a good story, Art said. Sure scared the heck out of me. It happened back in high school when I was trying out for the basketball team. Several dozen young men sat in the bleachers, wearing their school-issued gym clothes, waiting nervously for their name to be called by the coach. Once on the polished wood gym floor, they would be put through their paces, doing layups, dribbling the ball, and making shots from the free throw line. Then the coach would have them play a one-on-one game with one of the members of the varsity team. It was generally a humiliating experience for the student trying out, one that Art O'Reilly was not looking forward to. Being an O'Reilly was a blessing and a curse, especially when your older brother was a school icon. Sean had played football, basketball, baseball, and excelled in each. His grades were good. He had never done anything dorky, and despite it all, he was actually a nice guy. Coming up behind his older brother in school, the twins were very often compared to their older brother's accomplishments. He still could remember woodshop class where the teacher held up his project, smiled encouragingly, and said, "This is good, O'Reilly, pretty good. But you should see what your brother did." Then, to Art's mortification, the teacher went to his back room, pulled out the 3-year-old project his brother had done. "I saved this," the teacher said in a reverential tone, displaying it to the entire class, "because no other student has ever come this close to fulfilling the artistic aspect of this project." Art had wanted to crawl under his desk. And now, here he was again. Sean had been a great point guard, arguably the most important position on the team, and he had been so great. The coach, seeing the last name O'Reilly, was probably expecting more of the same. But Art didn't want to be a superstar, didn't think he could. He just wanted to play the game. The coach called name after name on the roster, and the minutes clicked by on the clock. Art had purposely put his name on the very bottom. He didn't want an audience to experience his probable humiliation. He glanced over at the locker room. Maybe he should just hide out, not be there when the coach called his name. The more he thought about it, the better idea it seemed. So sliding between the bleacher seats, he dropped down to the floor and scurried out of the room. The locker room was deserted, but Art could hear voices coming close. Probably the last few guys who had been creamed by the varsity players. He certainly didn't want to be found hiding. Looking around, he saw a door, his only choice for escape. He hurried over and turned the doorknob. Luck was finally with him. It was unlocked. Slipping inside, he pulled the door closed behind him. The room was about the size of a small classroom and as tall as the gymnasium. About 10 feet up, there was a small opaque window that, in the afternoon sun, gave the room a murky kind of glow. The room was filled with equipment that was either outdated or used at different times of the year. One corner held gymnastics equipment, or another a pile of cotton mats about 3 feet high, and boxes of basketballs, volleyballs, and softballs were scattered all around the rest of the room. Walking over to the mats, he jumped on them and laid down. He might as well get comfortable while he waited. Art got too comfortable, and a few hours later woke up to a darkened room with only a dim glow from an outside street lamp filtering through the window. "You okay?" Art jumped at the sound of the voice and turned to see another young man standing on the other side of the room. He breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. "Oh, yeah, I'm good," he replied. "I guess I just fell asleep." Why are you in here? The young man asked. Art studied the boy for a moment. He didn't look familiar and was dressed in gym clothes that looked a little strange. Maybe he was new to the school. I'm kind of hiding out, he admitted. My brother was like this huge jock a couple of years ago, and I'm not as good as he was. So instead of being publicly humiliated, I decided to check out this room. The young man laughed. Come on, you can't be that bad, he said. Art nodded. Oh, yes, I can, he said with a smirk. I'm Art. Art O'Reilly, by the way. Bobby, the young man said. Bobby Forrester. Good to meet you. Tossing a basketball at him, Bobby angled his head towards the door. Come on, there's no one out there now, he said. Why don't you show me what you can do? They walked out into the gym, and Art went to flip on the lights when Bobby stopped him. Better keep those off so we don't alert the custodian and get in trouble, he said. Besides, there's enough light in here to shoot. Art looked around. With the emergency lights glowing high in the ceiling and the glow of the street lights through the window, there was certainly enough light to shoot a few baskets. Sounds good to me, Art agreed, and slowly dribbled the ball across the floor to the free throw line. I probably should always play basketball in the dark. Bobby chuckled. Okay, let's see your free throw. Art bounced the ball a couple of times, lifted it, balanced it, and with one hand and pushed it off with the other. The ball sailed through the air, bounced against the rim, and sailed back towards Art. That was my boomerang shot, Art said, shaking his head with disgust. I have a bunch just like that. Hey, great shot, Bobby said, coming up next to Art, but this time don't flex your wrist as much. What do you mean? Art asked. Bobby demonstrated the move. The ball sailed up and through the basket. No rim, only net. That was awesome, Art said with a sigh. You do it now, Bobby said. Art shook his head. I'll try, and I hope you're not too disappointed. He followed Bobby's advice and found more often than not, he was able to make the same kind of shot Bobby had made. This is amazing, he said with a wide smile. Come on, Bobby said. Let me show you a few more moves. They played for several hours until Art looked up at the caged clock on the wall and saw that it was after 10 o'clock. My mom is going to kill me, he said to Bobby. I've got to go. But thanks. Thanks so much. You just changed my life. Bobby smiled at Art. Hey, it only took a couple of pointers, he said. You're a natural. Are you trying out tomorrow? Art asked. You ought to. You are amazing. Bobby nodded. I'll think about it, he said. And thanks for practicing with me tonight. It's been a long time since I've had so much fun. Art grabbed his jacket and his backpack. Are you coming? Bobby shook his head. No, I'm going to practice for a little while longer. Okay. Thanks again, Art said. See you tomorrow. Art jogged home and entered through the basement, finding his twin, Tom, sitting in the family room watching television. Where have you been? Tom asked. I'd been both you and me all night, and let me tell you, it's exhausting. Hey, thanks, Art replied. I was at the school. Some guy I met gave me some great tips for basketball. I might actually make the team. Well, congrats, Tom said. By the way, I ate your portion of dessert too. Oh, thanks, Art said sarcastically. Thanks a lot. The next afternoon, Art was actually eager for the coach to call his name. When he finally got his turn, he was able to implement all of the tricks Bobby had taught him and impress the coach. Finally, when it was time to meet the varsity player, Art used a couple of the moves Bobby had shown him the night before, and he was able to get around the player and actually even make a shot. Art was amazed when the coach stood up and applauded. That was great, O'Reilly, he said. I haven't seen moves like that since my brother Sean, right? Art asked, his happiness fading. No, I was going to say since Forrester, the coach replied. Forrester? Art asked. Bobby Forrester? The coach smiled. Yeah, he was a great kid, he said. He could have gone pro. A chill ran up Art's spine. What happened to Bobby? He asked. He was killed in a car accident coming to the last game of the season, the coach explained. Some drunk driver ran a red light. But sometimes I feel like he's still here with us. Yeah, Art replied slowly. I feel that way too. Chapter 6. Margaret turned to Tom after Art had finished the story. So you were both you and your brother for the whole night, she asked, her eyebrows raising. And just how many times have you done that? Tom grinned. Oh, just once or twice, Ma, he replied. Just once or twice. And what would have happened if your brother had been in trouble and we didn't know it because you were pretending to be him? She asked. I would have known, Ma, he replied easily. I always know when Art's in trouble. It's a twin thing. A twin thing? She asked skeptically. He paused for a moment and then met her eyes. Or maybe a triplet thing? He asked. Margaret gasped. How did you know? I guess it's time to tell my story, he replied. It was a hot summer night. The cicadas, did I say that right?
Cicadas.
The cicadas were buzzing in the trees outside their house. The windows were open with box fans whirring at top speed, trying to move the hot and humid air throughout the house. Tom O'Reilly lay on the bottom level of the bunk bed he shared with his twin brother Art. The heat was making it hard for him to sleep, and because Tom was the younger twin, Art got the top bunk, where the breeze was better. At 8 years old, Tom's outstretched legs could just reach the net of the wired squares that held the mattress up above him, and if he curled his toes through the metal, he could jostle the mattress and kick his brother. He thumped at the mattress once. Art, are you awake? He called. No response. He thumped it again. Nothing. With a frustrated sigh, Tom grabbed his pillow and headed out of the room. Maybe sleeping on the back porch would be cooler. Standing in the darkened hallway outside his bedroom, Tom listened for a moment to the unique sounds of his house at night. He heard the soft whir of the box fans, the low rumble of the refrigerator, the annoying drip in the upstairs bathroom sink, and the rhythmic growl of his dad's snoring. Tiptoeing down the stairs, he reached the living room and looked around. The soft light from the street lamps cast weird shadows inside the house. Everything looked a little bit different without the lights on. He crept down the hall to the kitchen. The cat clock on the wall, its tail moving in sync with its eyes, freaked him out during the day. He purposely turned away from the soft tick-tock, avoiding its face in the shadowy light. The door to the screened-in back porch was open. Another box fan placed in the doorway, directing air from outside into the house. Tom stepped around the fan and walked over to the canvas-covered, green-striped Davenport against the wall. Throwing his pillow down, he climbed onto the couch and laid down, feeling a cooling breeze wash over his body. He stretched and smiled. Finally, he was going to be able to get some sleep. He started to close his eyes when a movement caught his attention next to the door. He turned and saw Art standing on the other side of the fan. Hey, I thought you were asleep, he said. Why didn't you answer me? Art didn't say a word. What? Tom asked. You want to sleep here too? Art still didn't answer. Frustrated and tired, Tom turned away from his brother. Fine, do what you want to do. I am going to sleep. Tom woke up several hours later, feeling disoriented. It took him a few moments to realize he was on the porch, and then he remembered what he had done. He rolled over towards the kitchen door and was surprised to see Art still standing there watching him. "Why are you standing there?" he asked sleepily. "You need to come upstairs," his brother said. "Why?" "It's hot up there," Tom argued. "You need to come upstairs now," his brother replied urgently. "But—" Tom stopped. Art wasn't standing there anymore. Had he already gone upstairs without him? He punched his pillow, but then slid off the davenport and hurried through the house to the back staircase. When he got there, he noticed a funny smell. As he climbed the stairs, the smell got stronger, like a campfire, but a stinky one. "Art," he whispered. "Art, where are you?" He reached the top stair and noticed the smoke. He dashed to his room and touched the doorknob, jerking back and shouting in pain. The doorknob was hot. "Art," he screamed. "Art, are you in there?" "What's going on?" his father called from the end of the hall. "There's a fire and Art's in there," Tom screamed. Timothy ran down the hall and threw his weight against the door. It crashed open, and Tom could see a fire blazing in the corner of the room. Timothy ran over to the bunk bed, grabbed Art from the top bunk, and ran from the room. "What's wrong with him?" Tom pleaded, his heart filling with dread as he watched his father carry the lifeless body of his brother into his parents' room. He was just awake. "Sean, take the fire extinguisher and spray the fire," Timothy ordered his oldest son. "Margaret, call the fire department and tell them we need an ambulance." Tom hurried over to his brother's side, holding Art's inert hand in his own. He was just awake," he insisted through his tears. "He wanted me to come upstairs, but he was just awake." Timothy leaned over his son and performed CPR, breathing into his son's mouth, massaging his chest, and then listening for a response. "Come on, Art," he pleaded. "Come back to us." "Art, you gotta come back," Tom said. "I need you." A moment later, Art coughed, and Tom and Timothy met each other's tear-filled eyes. "He's going to be fine," Timothy whispered in a broken voice. "He's going to be fine." Several hours later, the house was quiet again. The fire department had been to the house and claimed faulty wiring in the box fan had caused the fire. The fumes from the burning plastic had nearly suffocated Art, and if they hadn't found him when they did, they called Tom a hero. But as he lay back on the davenport in the screened-in porch, he didn't feel like one. His mother and father were at the hospital with Art. Sean was sleeping on the couch in the living room, and he was back where everything had started. "But Art was awake," he whispered. "I saw him." "No, you saw me." Tom looked over and saw Art standing next to the kitchen door. He felt a chill run down his spine. Are you Art?" he stuttered softly. The boy shook his head. "No, I'm the other one," he said softly. "The other one?" Tom asked, his voice shaking. "What other one?" "The one that died," the boy replied, and then he faded away. Chapter 7. Margaret O'Reilly was weeping softly into a tissue. "I had no idea," she cried. "The three of you were so little when you were born, and little Gregory only lived for a few hours." "Yes, he told me," Tom said. "Told you?" Margaret asked. "He came back a couple of times," he replied with an easy shrug. "I thought it was cool to have an angel brother. And it was neat because he looked just like Art and me. It was like he was growing up with us. He checks in now and then to see how his family's doing. Margaret reached over and clasped her son's hand. Thank you, she said. A mother's heart always yearns for her lost babies. It's so wonderful to know he's fine. And I suppose you never know who's sharing your house with you, Tom said with a wink. Which opens the door to my story, Mary said. The part about not knowing who's sharing your house with you. How are we doing time-wise?
We are 30 minutes and 30
Okay.
seconds.
It's okay with you guys. This is a short story. We're going to finish this one up. Okay. Pumpkin was a very large, very spoiled, and very determined to get his own way. Pumpkin was the O'Reilly's marmalade cat. Pumpkin chose the O'Reilly family when Mary was 3 years old. He wandered into the yard, climbed up on one of the chairs Mary had arranged for her tea party, and daintily lapped away at the heavy creamed tea. Mary was delighted. Because Pumpkin had first come to Mary, the little girl had decided that he must be her cat. So poor Pumpkin had been subjected to all sorts of indignities the average cat would not have had to put up with. Quite often, he was adorned with bonnets, ribbons, doll dresses. An occasional barrette encircled the clump of his orange hair. He went for a ride in doll carriages, sipped tea from a platter, and listened to the endless chatter of an excited toddler. Pumpkin was a good sport and a true gentleman. Not once did he extend his sharp claws and exact revenge for the humiliations he encountered. He took it all in stride. At night, once Mary had gone to bed, Pumpkin would come downstairs and curl himself up on the back of the couch, closest to the fireplace. He would purr happily, enjoying the warmth from the fire and the soft, calming conversation of the two adults who shared his room. He didn't mind the adults at all. After all, the one called Ma would feed him every day and make sure his water bowl was clean and filled. And the one called Da would scratch him in the most delicious ways. However, once they turned off the lights and locked the door, Pumpkin knew it was time for him to assume his nighttime post. With his tail waving tall in the air, Pumpkin would march upstairs and over to Mary's bedroom door. With agility Houdini would have admired, he stood on his back legs, reached up to the doorknob, and gave it a slight twist. The door slowly opened several inches under his weight, enough for him to slip through and head to his final destination, Mary's bed. Hopping up on the bed, he walked around until he found his favorite spot, nestled against her back. With a satisfied sigh, he would close his eyes and fall asleep. Mary and Pumpkin shared many delightful days, but as the years passed and the toddler grew into a child, Pumpkin found himself spending more and more time watching out the window for his favorite person to come home. He spent most of his days helping out in the kitchen, making sure Ma knew that she was loved by intertwining himself between her legs, especially when she was doing some mundane tasks like carrying baskets of laundry or mopping the floor. He could tell she appreciated his attention and would generally ignore any less than polite comments she offered in his direction. When Mary came home, he would follow her upstairs and sit on the desk as she worked on her homework. And every night, like clockwork, he would open her door, lay down next to her, and go to sleep. More years passed, and Pumpkin got to be an old man. The stairs were harder to climb. Mary had to reach down and lift him up onto the bed, and he was often very tired. Worried about her friend, Mary would make sure she took the time to pet him and let him know how much she loved him. One night, after Mary had gone to bed,
Pumpkin lay on the couch, soaking in the warmth from the fire. His breathing was shallow, and he was feeling so very tired. He knew he needed to get up soon, go up to Mary's room for the night, but he couldn't find the energy. Finally, he just closed his eyes. Ma came into the room and found Pumpkin on the back of the couch. His old body was still, and he was no longer breathing. With tears in her eyes, she cradled the cat to her chest and pressed a kiss on his forehead. "Goodbye, my sweet friend," she whispered hoarsely. "You will be missed." The storyteller's not supposed to cry. Later that night, Mary woke to the sound of her door opening. Half asleep, she smiled and started to slip out of the covers to help Pumpkin onto the bed. But before her feet touched the floor in the dark room, she felt the familiar weight of Pumpkin on the mattress. "Good boy," she said sleepily, laying her head back down on the pillow. "You did it all by yourself." She felt him walk across the bed, nestled down next to her, and heard his contented purring. Pumpkin was right where he belonged. Chapter 8. Once again, Margaret O'Reilly was wiping her eyes with a tissue. "I loved that cat," she sniffed. "You called him a bothersome creature," Timothy reminded her. "I call you a bothersome creature too," she replied, "and I still love you." Timothy chuckled. That's true," he said. Standing, he leaned over and blew out the jack-o'-lantern. Another Halloween has passed, and another great night of storytelling has occurred. And now, I believe, it's time for all of you to go to bed. Mary gave each of her parents a hug and then climbed the stairs to her bedroom. She quickly washed up, changed into her pajamas, and then climbed into bed. She leaned over and clicked off the light on her nightstand, plunging her bedroom into darkness. And then she waited. A few minutes later, she heard the sound of her doorknob moving and the door opening slightly. Her head snuggled into the pillow. She held her breath until she felt the familiar feline weight on her bed. A moment later, she felt pressure against the small of her back and heard the familiar soft strains of a contented purr. "Good night, Pumpkin," she whispered, feeling safe and protected. "Sweet dreams." So we just, obviously that one.
Gosh darn it, I came here to get spooked. Not cry.
Not cry.
Gosh darn it.
Emotional stuff. So I have had experience with ghosts of pets. And have you guys had those same experiences where you've seen a pet that you know you shouldn't be seeing? So
Terry Bowles
said it right.
commented,
Yeah.
"I'm getting teary. Our boy Rudy, Collie Beagle Mix, passed away 1 year ago tomorrow. I'm glad you went on and read that story. We feel Rudy with us often."
I remember when that happened to you. Yeah. And we have had a number, because raising 7 kids, we've had a number of animals, and quite often I'll see somebody out of the corner of my eye, and it's comforting to know that they're still hanging with us. So yeah, sorry about Rudy.
Sheila said, "That was fantastic, Terry."
Aw, thank you. Thank you. It was fun.
She also just said, "My dog Patty is always with us. Bless him."
Ah, nice. I think they are. I think they just love us, and they just stay with us. That unconditional love. Yep. So, opening up for any questions that you have. Maybe we've run out of questions.
Linda Wooten said, yes, I see my parents' pups all the time when I visit. I can also hear them and feel them when they climb on my bed.
Cool. Isn't that interesting that I have felt, the bed kind of, and it's the cat or it's the dog because of the weight, and it's not freaky scary. I mean, maybe a little bit scary the first time, but it's kind of a comforting, like, good. I have a little 4-footed furry guardian angel. I love those kinds. Nice.
Terry Snyder said, I have 6 dogs and several hamsters and sugar gliders buried in my yard. Don't know what a sugar glider is.
Is it like a little hamsterish kind of thing with like a webbed like arm so they can glide? I think you're going to have to explain that one to us, Terry, because that's what I'm picturing.
They're all agreeing with you that it's very comforting when that happens.
Nice. Yeah.
And then Terry Bull said, my mom and I went to a psychic medium, and as we walked in the door of her farmhouse, she smiled and asked us who we brought with us.
Oh, so was it a people that you brought with you, or was it a animal, fur baby that you brought? I have a friend, Amelia, from Amelia's Ghost Tours in Galena, and when she has spirits around her towel, in Vegas they talk about when you're playing cards, you have a towel, like some people's eyes will twitch or their eyebrows will go out, and so people study that kind of thing. But she says when there's spirits around her, she knows it is because she gets like a tickle in her throat, and she always has to cough like that because of the tickle. And she was telling me that every time I come into her store, she gets that. So I bring people in, and I don't know if it's the people that already live there, and they just say, hey, Terry's here, and so they decide to come visit too, or how that is. But yeah, I tend to bring people with me too. I don't know who they are.
Some strangers. Terry Bull said it was our dog Rudy. She described him perfectly.
Oh, that is so wonderful. That is so great.
And
cool.
Then going back to the sugar sliders.
Okay.
Terry Snyder said, look it up. It's easier for you to read about them.
Okay.
Yes, Terry, they glide.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay.
So you're right.
We also have in our acreage, we have kind of a pet cemetery, and it tends to be scattered, it's not like a Stephen King's kind of thing. It's like their favorite tree or their favorite area. And so, yeah. And so when I walk by those places, I just happen to have little conversations in case they have to be hanging around. But I'd almost think that they'd be more in the house, unless it's a beautiful day. But yeah. Yeah.
Shelia says, it's very comforting, hon. I'm a psychic and people and animals are always around us. I feel privileged to be able to communicate with them.
I think that's an awesome gift to have. And I'm sure, it's easy for me to say that's an awesome gift, but I'm sure it's like a gift and a curse at the same time. But that ability to see so clearly through the veil, that's an awesome thing. So that's cool. Okay. More questions or comments?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, now is the best time.
And I don't think we've had any weird things happening this week in the house. I think last week I kind of told you about all the weird that's been happening. You have any weird?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. Yeah. And I haven't heard, I've got some great stories from readers that I'm going to compile and put together into my next podcast. And they are some really cool stories. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It's really nice to get people's stories. First of all, because they're true and they're real and they happen to people. But secondly, I'm not doing research. It's really It's really nice, and that sounds awful, but it's really nice to have those kinds of stories.
So Linda Wooten says, my twin boys love animals, so our house is more like a zoo. And every time one of the little ones passed away, my boys would have a funeral ceremony and play taps for them instead of prayer.
Oh, I love that. We had the same thing. You know, we live on 5 acres, and so we had everybody was always bringing, you know, the bird that fell out of the tree or the barn kitten or so it was a farm inside the house and outside the house. As a matter of fact, we have baby chicks and they're in my bathtub because that's because they're maybe a week old. They're adorable. I'll post pictures on Facebook maybe tomorrow, but so you bring them home and they're just a day old, and they have to be in a confined space with a heat lamp over them because they don't have their mom to cuddle them in. And so the best place in our house, because we have Hemingway who has offered to babysit several times. We have Hemingway who might destroy them. So we have them up in the upstairs bathroom where I have one of those old, you know, the claw footed tubs. And so I've got an old box in the tub, and I have the chicks there, and I have a heat lamp hanging over them. And so anytime you go into the bathroom, because we still need to use the bathroom, so yeah, so it is a zoo. It is a farm inside the house as well as outside the house.
So Terry Bowles asked, so can we talk more about the writing workshop?
Sure. So I've done like a presentation mostly to high school students. I did one to college students, but I just kind of talked about the whole hero's journey. Robert Campbell talks about a hero's journey. So we kind of talked about how a story is supposed to progress, you know, so some of the elements. And then I think I just gave an overview on some of the mistakes that often new writers make, old writers make, but often writers make. Talk about showing and not telling, you know, the difference there. And then, you know, kind of go through some of those ideas. And then maybe if you're interested, give you a little information on how to self-publish, like through Amazon. That's where I get most of, you know, that's my experience. And then we could open it up to questions and answers. So how does that sound?
I think maybe a good way to go about it, because I'm sure some people want to watch the workshop, and different people might want to watch the
ghost stories.
And so maybe the way that we do it, and this, I'm just thought of this while we were doing this.
Okay.
Is we have at 3:00 we have the ghost stories.
Okay.
And then like at 3:30, 3:45, that's when we have the second video, which is the writing workshop.
Okay.
And so it just happens one right after the other.
And so what we might do is have 2 links. Yeah. Then. So one is the ghost story side. So then, yeah, if you want to access the link later, the video later,
exactly,
you don't have to go through 45 minutes of ghost stories. That's brilliant.
That's what I was thinking.
He's brilliant. So yeah, okay. How does that sound? Does that sound like a workable plan for you guys?
Sheila asked, where do you get your ideas for your stories?
Okay, so these stories that I told you, let's start with the cat one happened to me, so that's, you know, real experience. The one about the twins being triplets, I was telling ghost stories for the Stevenson County Historical Society. It was their Halloween event, and I always let people tell me stories. And this man stood up, and he said that he and his wife had triplets, and one was a little girl who passed away hours after she was born, and they named her Angelica because she was an angel. And then he said years later, the triplets were probably 6 or 7. Well, the twins now were probably 6 or 7. And he was downstairs watching TV. And he looked up at the top of the stairs and saw his daughter Christine standing there. And it was late. She was supposed to be in bed. So he told her, Christine, go to bed. And she just stood there and watched him for a while. And he said, Christine, go to bed. And then so she kind of toddled off down the hallway. And he continued watching whatever program he was watching and thought, I better check on her. So he got up and he went up the stairs and he went into Christine's room. And she wasn't in there. And he thought, typical parent thing. So then he went into his bedroom and his wife was there and there was Christine sound asleep in their bed. And he said, I told her to go to her own bed. And she said, well, when? And he said, 10 minutes ago. And she said, no. Christine's been in here for about 2 hours. She's been asleep the entire time. So that was kind of weird enough. Then the next morning, they were at breakfast and the other part of the triplet twin combination, who was a boy, came down for breakfast, sat on the chair and looked at Christine and said, why were you in my room last night? You kept staring at me. It was really weird. And once again, Christine had been in with her parents the entire night. So he explained about Angelica and decided that Angelica was just visiting, checking on the family. And it was interesting because I ended up meeting Christine later when she was in high school. My son Nathan was her friend. So it's kind of interesting how that all worked together. But so that's how I got that idea. But it's sometimes from real life and sometimes from this really weird mind that I have. So, yes.
Those are the fun ones.
Yeah, the really weird mind ones.
Yeah. Let's see. Terry Bowles and Terry Snyder.
Okay.
Both like the idea of the two different.
Good. Okay. That's what we'll do then. We'll just do. So Andrew is the one that does all that setup stuff. So I will link out. So next week we'll have 2 different links, one for ghost stories and then a new link. So we'll do the okay, goodbye now. And then we'll close and then we'll start the other one. Okay, good. Sorry, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at Andrew.
Shelia said, that's amazing. I think talking about the different...
The twin triplets. Yeah, that was one of those stories that when they tell it, it gives you goosebumps. Yeah, that was, yeah.
Terry Bowles asked, would you be interested in hearing stories from us?
Yes.
We've had?
Yes.
Should I put the...
Yes, so I'm collecting them now, and I know you've got good ones. I think it's stories at terrireid.com is where I'm collecting them, and I've been using them for my podcast. And the podcast, unless you can subscribe to Patreon, and there's a couple additional things if you're a subscriber, but the rest of the podcasts through Spotify or through Apple. We're still looking at Himalaya, right?
Yeah, Himalaya is persnickety.
Okay.
I'm still working on that.
Okay.
I've been trying to for a while.
So, but most of the places except Himalaya that you go for your podcast, you can find my podcast there. It's called Terri Reid's Attic, and it's for free, but it'll tell all these different stories. So yes, please submit more stories. I love them.
Yeah, and then also let us know if we can also tell the stories as well.
Oh yeah, if you just want to send me your stories and you just want them to be between me and you, that's okay too. So yeah, but let me know. And then let me know if you want me to say like Terry from Louisville, Kentucky, or if you would rather, or Terry from Oklahoma. Tell me what if you want to be an anonymous person, send how you want me to handle that.
Okay. Great, yeah. Terry Bowles said she'll write a few of her experiences up and share it through the link. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Cool.
It is about 3:50. It's almost 3:55.
Okay. Final questions?
Just the great stare down. People are like, "Oh no, we got to think of more questions to ask."
No. What are you guys making for dinner? I have no idea what I'm making for dinner.
Terri
good.
Snyder said you can tell my George stories.
I love your George stories. I think I still have copies of those. So I'll look. Thank you. Okay.
Terry Bowles said we need more Terrys in this group.
Terrys are awesome, right?
I'm afraid you guys are going to take over the world. Both the guy and the girl
Terrys, yeah.
Both genders.
Yeah.
Sheila says, I'll send you a few experiences too, Terri.
Thank you. I would love that. You know, I really think that the whole ghost storytelling thing, it's such a nice community because we've all had these experiences and we all understand and we all believe each other. So I love this. There's only a way to like do this massive Zoom meeting where we could just all sit around like a big campfire and tell each other stories.
That'd be fun.
That would be cool. Okay, so are we good question wise?
Yeah, everyone's just
nice chilling.
Bull said thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, thanks for coming. This is so much fun. So next week, same time, 3:00 for ghost stories, and then 3:45 for the writers thing. And so pass the word about the writers thing because people who might not be interested in ghost stories might be interested in the writers things, especially I think, you know, the people that teenagers who would really like to write but don't know, and not just teenagers, I guess, adults don't know how to get started, you know, so we'll talk about that too. So yeah, spread the word and I'll see you guys next week. Have a great week. Hopefully your weather's nice. Bye.